Hi, this is Amrita Sukumar, and I'm bringing to you this podcast called Unsettling. Look around you. Everyone is trying to create their own story. Make a tiny change in someone's life by just following their passion and in turn, inspiring the others to follow suit. This podcast brings to you stories of people who have defied the definition of settled set by the society and have created their own. They have found happiness in their version of settled. What is yours? Nobody knows about the beginning of time, but we sure know how to tell time thanks to the clocks and watches around us. But did you know that watchmaking and clockmaking is an art which is called horology? I definitely didn't. So to know more about clockmaking and whether I'm pronouncing horology right, I have my next guest with me all the way from Bangalore, Mr. Dilip Sivaraman. Hey Dilip, how are you?
I'm good, Amrita. How are you?
I'm good too. Which clock have you been making nowadays?
Well, I'm making a Gato for a client right now as we speak. So,
okay, we will be talking more in detail about Gato for sure.
Sure.
But the first question I would like to ask you is, when did you find your love for clockmaking?
That's one thing. I mean, I'm not sure if I've always been in love with horology, or was there some sort of a trigger, which kind of caused me to start doing this. But I don't know. So when I kind of look back, I must have been about 10. And I remember my grandfather's HMT, and it had this word automatic written on it. I kind of asked him what did it mean, and he told me like what it actually does, that it's a mechanical clock. It just kind of wound itself with the movement of his hand. Now that totally blew me away, I mean, I was like, how can something just power itself?
Right.
Like without electricity and just show you time, I mean, that totally blew me away.
Oh, that is
it was like yeah. And it was the 80s and there was no internet. We had like one channel on TV, so the exposure also was kind of limited,
Correct.
And then I started seeing these ads of Rolex and Omegas and everything on those National Geographic magazines. And then I used to ask around, about these watches, where you could get them, how much they costed and everything, even as a child. So I really started getting fascinated about these mechanical watches, after that.
Okay.
So yeah, and it wasn't commonplace, to find these Rolex stores like you see them now, at least in the 80s. Things were quite middle class around in India. I mean, so yeah, so you really didn't get much of exposure about these watches then.
That is true. And, actually, I did not know about this self-wound clocks at all till I grew up. Because when I grew up is when I saw all these things. Because I think by the time I was like 5 to 6 years old, there was already these quartz clocks had already come up, and battery operated clocks had already come up. So I had never seen something like that. And when I did see, it's of course something that makes you curious, but not as much as you were. So that is something that definitely intrigues me.
Yeah, because a lot of times these things just get lost in the background, So I think you really need the keen observation, I think, sometimes to actually,
and a lot of interest, which you do have.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of interest on a lot of things. I mean, even if you take a nail cutter or a scissor or whatever, I just go into the details and see how it is made or whatever. So yeah.
Oh, so you are the kind of person who who dismantles something to know how it works.
Yes, and I also like the softer aspects of things, like the heritage of a brand. All these things really kind of matter to me.
Okay.
I mean, the romance behind every little thing, how it is made, who made it.
Oh, okay. So that detail.
Yeah.
Dilip, I have read about you like almost for half a day preparing for these questionnaires for this episode.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I'm sure that I still don't know even 0.1% of the different aspects of clockmaking. But I also read that you figured out the intricacies of clockmaking on your own. How did that happen?
I mean, I actually didn't have a choice. So when I set about building a clock, there's very little material that you can get. It's not like you can go join a school and learn how to do it.
Okay.
So, I mean, thanks to internet that we are blessed with today, I mean, you can get a lot of information out there,
Yes.
Over the internet. But again, the information is quite limited, because it's kind of you could almost say it's like a lost or dying art. So there's very little information out there. You really have to do a lot of digging to get all the info,
Yes.
But then, yeah, you can kind of learn everything about it. Yeah.
Okay. How much time did it take for you to understand the intricacies?
You know what? I mean, honestly, I'm still learning. There's still so much to be learned. There's never you could never say everything about it. So, see, it took me about a year and a half to build my first clock.
Year and a half.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that included learning to work with power tools, machines. I mean, learning about the fundamentals of watches and clocks, and then develop a movement of my own. All that put together.
Okay, so it takes a lot of time because honestly, I read about it and I didn't understand half of it. I just read about planetary gears and a lot of things so that I don't sound, someone who does not know much about clocks when I'm interviewing.
No, you don't. You really don't need to know all that much. I mean, yeah, because as far as people outside the industry are concerned, I mean, you just need to understand the fundamental of it, know what a mechanical watch or a clock means. That's enough. I mean, it's for us horologists to take all the headache of how to build it,
Yes, I decided to do that after that. I mean, I read for half a day and then I'm like, okay, if I go into more details, I might have to dismantle a clock myself and then understand what is going on inside. And that
why not? I think you should totally do it.
I will definitely do it if I find a grandfather clock like you did, and I will do so. But not right now. I don't think I'm that interested. And if I do some dismantling at home, I will definitely hear it from my father. So that's something I don't want to do. So Dilip, you said that you like dismantling before understanding how anything works. So how many clocks did you dismantle before you figured out the mechanism of a clock?
See, it's quite funny. It all started like I just wanted a wall clock, okay, and preferably an old mechanical wall clock. I bought one online, and it just wouldn't work, At least when I hung it on my wall, it wouldn't work, and I was like trying to figure out what is wrong. I mean, then I started looking up online as to what could be done about it. I got a guy to repair it. It worked at his place. It wouldn't work on my wall, and that's when I was like, okay, let's just open it up and start learning about it, And then that's it. Like it was literally like opening a can of worms. I opened it and there you go. Like I wanted to learn how the fundamentals of it work, and then went online, started reading about it, and then I figured this movement isn't exactly a great one. It was like one of those mass-produced movements.
Right.
Then I started figuring out where you could get one of those really fine movements, and then I figured that nobody makes them anymore. That's when I started like I might as well like just start designing one myself. Learning how it works.
Right.
Then I thought, okay, I wanted to understand what this escapement was all about. Well, escapement is actually like the heart of a watch or a clock,
Okay.
Then I started designing it. Then I thought like, okay, now I need to build it. Then I figured like 3D printing had suddenly taken over everywhere. So I thought like I'll send it for 3D printing. I 3D printed the escapement, a much larger version, so that I could understand how an escapement works.
Okay.
I got it printed. I tested it. It was working, but it wasn't working to my satisfaction. I kept revising it. Next thing you know is I wanted to turn it into a proper functioning metal one.
Okay.
Then, then I had to learn machining. I went to a school, joined a machining school, started learning how to mill, how to work with a lathe. Then I bought a lathe. I mean, so for somebody who wanted a wall clock, to buy a lathe to build a wall clock, well, I know it's a bit far,
exactly.
But so I never stopped myself from doing what I felt like doing, and it paid off. I mean, I was finally happy.
Yes, yes, it definitely did. But I mean, normal people would just like go to a watchmaker and tell him, hey, if you can fix it, it's fine. Otherwise, it's okay. Let's like get rid of it. But you went into the details and you figured everything out and got the machinery to get everything fixed.
Yeah, I mean, funnily, like all those machines were sitting on my dining table. It's amazing that my wife was like totally tolerant of all these things. Eventually, it just went totally out of proportion. I actually had to get another place, I started renting another place where I could move these machines.
Okay.
Yeah, which still continues to be my studio.
Acha. How long has it been?
Well, now it's been what, 5.5 years, 6 years.
6 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So Dilip, what are the types of clocks you made? Can you give a brief description of Gato? I hope I'm pronouncing it right. One is Gato, one is Lisko.
Yeah.
And a precision regulator clock, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, the precision regulator is still on the drawing board. I mean, I still haven't like really found the time to, take
Bring
the prototype to life yet. Quite busy at the moment. So Gato is the first clock that I actually made.
Yeah.
So Gato is basically a floor standing. It's like a grandfather clock, A little bit unconventional. I mean, it's a floor standing clock,
right?
And it's a tall case movement, as some people call it. So it's about 7 feet tall.
Oh my God!
It's got
Okay.
And it's got a seconds pendulum, which means it takes about 1 second to move to one side and come back. That's what a seconds pendulum is. And it's kind of a standard, for regulator clocks or precision clocks, a seconds pendulum, because each tick and tock that you hear is 1 second long.
Okay.
So many of the smaller clocks that you have in your at homes, they would tick much faster than that.
Okay, I did not know this.
Yeah, so Gato's got a seconds pendulum, and it's a tall one. And Lisko, on the other hand, is a much shorter wall clock.
Okay.
So what had happened was, like, because I was kind of totally into the movement and learning how to make clocks and stuff like that, was like the entire movement was my own. So I was like so into it, and that I really wanted to showcase the movement, when I built the clock.
Right.
So what had happened was the movement became a very skeletal movement. So Gato's got a skeletal movement. So skeletal movement is one where you kind of see the entire movement. It's totally naked. You don't have a dial that covers up the movement behind.
Correct.
Because I put in so much effort into it. It was my first movement. I was so proud of it and everything. I really wanted to showcase the movement.
Okay.
So that's the reason Gato has a very skeletal movement. A lot of people love it because it's very clear that it's a mechanical clock because it's skeletal,
Yes.
Because if you have a dial, you don't know what's going on behind it because you don't know if it's a battery powering it or whatever. Here it's like there's much more clarity, right, of what's going on. So Gato is a skeletal movement. Now with Lisko, which is my second clock, what I did was I made it non-skeletal. It's totally covered up because I wanted to do something just the opposite of what I'd done for Gato. Because Gato, of course, I'd gotten really carried away with making the movement. I was like super in love with it. Every little screw is well designed in it. So I wanted to like really show it off. But the legibility took a little bit of a beating, which is okay. If you want really legible way to read time, you have your mobile,
Correct.
But here it's a commemoration for craftsmanship, right? That's what you're really trying to do. So which is perfectly fine. So with Lisko, I wanted to focus on legibility. So the movement is not skeletal in it. You have a dial, and you even have a case which totally covers up the pendulum, even because Lisko, I've kind of focused on a modern small apartment, where there's so much going on in your life. You don't want a pendulum also taking more of your brain space, So it's got a pendulum behind it. It's a mechanical working movement, but it's not loud. It's totally subtle and shows you the time really loud and clear.
Right.
So basically, there are two different animals, Lisko and Gato.
Yes, I've seen pictures of both. I love both of them. I love Lisko, which is the smaller version. I think Lisko is a wall clock more. It's not a floor clock.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Gato is a floor.
And it's also very skinny.
Yeah, it's very skinny. Are the mechanisms different? The way they work?
Yeah, the mechanisms are completely different.
Right.
So Lisko's got a much simpler mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Gato is very complex that way.
Yeah, if I read it right, it's some pulley mechanism. If I'm not wrong.
No, in Lisko, so what I've done is I've inverted the clock movement. It's usually when you open up a regulator clock, you have the escapement right on top, and you have the winding key at the bottom.
Okay.
And so, but in Lisko, it's inverted. You have the escapement at the bottom, and the winding key goes to the top.
Okay.
This actually helped me make the movement much thinner. So the idea in Lisko was to make it really skinny, yet mechanical, and hang it on a wall. Because, like I said, I mean, it's meant for a really small apartment and everything, in cases like that. So, I mean, I didn't want to make it too fat, and so that's why the inverted movement. So it's kind of nice looking, because skinny and tall, sticks to a wall. That's the reason I've called it Lisko even, because Lisko in Finnish.
Lizard.
Yeah. It means lizard.
I've done my research.
Yeah. Okay.
Gato means, if I remember right, it means a cat in Spanish.
Yeah. It is a cat.
Yes. So I did my research. See, I'm telling you, I did half a day of research.
That's amazing.
Thank you. I'm taking credit. So honestly, I would like to say that both the clocks look absolutely amazing. I've seen Gato. I understand when you said that, it's a skeleton kind of structure. And that's the beauty of it. You can see how the entire thing functions. And honestly, it's museum worthy. That's what I feel.
Oh, thanks a lot. Okay.
You can keep it in a museum. There can be people who come and see the entire thing. Anybody who's really interested in horology and understands what is happening in the back, they would absolutely love it. It's actually wonderful. I really loved it. So, Dilip, how well is clockmaking received in India? Is it still an art form that is well received, or it's something still coming up?
It's see, I'm not too sure. People probably knew the value of it once upon a time when mechanical horology was the only way to tell time.
Right.
I mean, you didn't have a choice, right? So, and I'm sure, I mean, early last century, I mean, I've even heard that the Indian royalty were big patrons of horology, and they've really been patrons of Swiss watchmaking, So that way, India has had a contribution, not from making watches point of view, but at least buying point of view.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, post-independence and post 70s, 80s and everything, I think after the quartz revolution happened, I think people have kind of, I don't know, they've been kind of detached from mechanical horology for quite some time. It's not just in India, it's all over the world. But at least the rest of the world, people have, the interest is caught back on. But India is kind of, it's still a bit of a niche thing. There is a niche that kind of understands, people call it art horology, or mechanical horology. I mean, it's a very niche thing in India. There are very few people that actually know what's going on. So if you're so Amrita, if your question is, are Indian parents going to be okay with their kids taking up horology for a profession? I wouldn't really know, because I understand that's the hidden this thing under this in this question, but I really wouldn't know, because it's not something that probably interests a lot of people, right? So they probably don't think there's going to be much of a scope in these kind of professions. But yeah, that shouldn't be a factor in deciding what you want to do at all. I mean,
that is true.
There's room for all kinds of crafts and arts and everything in this world, and I think people should totally take it up if they, want to do it.
I completely agree, because mechanical clockmaking is not something everybody knows. Even I was unaware of it until I read about you. So since there is a gap, there's a knowledge gap, I feel. If that gap is filled somewhere, maybe people will be more interested in this craft. But for now, it's still a niche craft, as you said. There's still time, or there's still, there should be a lot more interest in people. That has to be created before, parents say, hey, it's okay if you get into clockmaking.
I know. I think it's but I wouldn't be surprised in another 20-30 years you'll have a lot of independent watchmaking coming out of India also.
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case, because I think you need to go that full circle. People need to most of India is yet to see that abundance, right? So once you've seen that, then you want what is beyond what is normal, right? And this is when these kind of things are really going to kick in. So, for me, independent horology is all about the movement itself. It's not just a cosmetic thing. It shouldn't just be about the way something looks. People should also go into the depths of it. Even what you don't see is very important.
Right.
In watchmaking, they call it like in-house movements, or that's really what defines a good watch or a clock. So world over, in a lot of these people that follow up mechanical horology, this is something that has kind of become a bit of a sought after requirement in watches and clocks, that the company makes in-house movements.
Yes, that cannot be copied by someone else, because that is unique to your style and
and not only that, like, see, you can't have a Toyota with a Maruti engine inside it, right? It kills the whole fun,
Yes.
It's not pure enough.
Agree.
So brands have to get there,
I completely agree. So to get there is a lot of effort, and I think that patience is there only in a few, which you also have, and that is how you reached AHCI. That was the competition.
Yeah, so the AHCI is like an organization of these independent watchmakers. They're based in Switzerland.
Yes.
So I think there are about 30 to 40 members in it. So all these watchmakers, they make everything by hand, and they're what people call independent watchmakers. So they're totally detached from the corporate scene.
Okay.
So they still try to practice the 400-year-old watchmaking tradition, where they make everything by hand.
Okay.
So if one of them dies, it's not like someone else is going to continue making their watches. Like they're like an artist, When Picasso died, it's not like their kids can take over the business, right?
Yes.
So that should be the scene, that should be the way this profession is practiced.
Okay. So that brings me to the question. You keep on saying that, there is a lot of in-house movement that you create. So in such a scenario, as you said, that this is not something that can be carried forward and someone else can learn it. So how difficult is it, or how easy it is to maintain the clock by somebody who buys it from you, by the customer?
See, principally, it's not very, very different, right? So, just about anybody, any person that services a clock or watch should be able to fix it.
Okay.
In case there is anything, anything needs to be serviced or whatever. And in any case, like for me, the maintainability or the longevity of the movement has been of extreme significance, So what I've done here is I kind of looked into where exactly in the movement, what exactly in the movement degrades over time.
Right.
So my focus was into that initially, and I wanted to make sure that these things don't degrade ever. So I basically want my clocks to continue ticking like hundreds of years, So I wanted to make sure they are like of heirloom quality, and this maintaining issue never happens, because over time, another 100 years, there are probably less people that know how to fix these things, right?
Correct. Yes.
So how do you make sure it continues ticking at that time? So I've kind of made sure that I use everything modern to kind of avoid having any problem in the future. For instance, like in older clocks, there's a lot of wear in these pivots, pivots and bushes. I mean, these are, see, all the gears in a clock are called wheels, okay?
Okay.
And the wheels sit on an arbor, which is the shaft. And they go into these little holes. And what happens is the part that goes into these little holes is called a pivot. So people usually oil those areas, so that they're kept like totally, friction free and everything. So what happens is over time, these areas, right, these holes that keep getting larger, they become oval shaped and everything because of the movement. So so that's exactly where the wear happens, So in my case, like I don't have any of these pivots sitting into holes. I've got ball bearings for all these areas. So they take a lot more beating, compared to traditional pivots.
Okay.
So what happens is, so you don't even have to oil them.
Okay.
So in the future, if ever there is a problem, you just remove this ball bearing and put another one in place, and this thing will continue ticking.
Okay, that's amazing.
And plus you don't have to oil it. So oil usually attracts a lot of grit, and that kind of increases the wear. So here you avoid all those things,
Okay, so you are creating something that is that has 9 lives. I think that is why it's called Gato.
Yeah. So it'll continue living, So yeah, if a whole generation stops using it for a while, another generation just decides to start the clock, it'll just start ticking, So that's how I wanted this to be.
Yes.
So the only place where there is no ball bearing is something called a pallet in the escapement, and there I'm using a ruby. So and again, there's no oiling there, So
okay.
So basically, it all runs dry. So there is going to be very little maintenance required in these clocks.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that to me, because I wouldn't have understood it by reading a lot of things. Oh, so well, you're creating something that is long lasting. You found the kinks and the problems that were there in the older clocks, and you try to fix it to make sure that this thing did not happen again.
Yeah. So for me, buying that clock and hanging it on my wall and that thing not moving, right? For me, that was all the inspiration. I didn't want anybody else to go through this ever again, So
right. So you fixed all the problems. Like, you don't even have to go and get it fixed. It fixes itself. So
it just fixes itself. Yeah.
Don't worry. It's just going to last for 100 years. Maximum, you'll have to change one small thing. Anyone can do it for you. No problem.
Yeah. Even that, I don't know. Maybe in another 100 years, if I were alive, which I doubt, I would know. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will keep track. We will make sure that.
Yeah. Please do.
So, how much time did it take for you to create your first accurately designed clock?
So it took me about a year and a half, and and then of course this is so that AHCI basically had a competition, for young watchmakers and clockmakers and all that stuff. This is in 2016, so I wanted to be up and ready for that competition.
Okay.
That's when I created the first one, and now I spent another year and a half again to perfect this, because there were like a lot of teething issues.
Okay.
So things that I knew I had to make it better. So I did spend a lot of time doing that. That took another year and a half. So yeah,
1.5 years total.
Yeah, 1.5. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not getting into this for sure. I do not have that kind of patience.
Yeah, but you could always do it while you're doing something else, which is what I did. I did have a career,
yes,
a primary career, while I was doing all these things, and I still managed to do it on the side, So yeah, it's something you can do.
I'm already doing the podcast on the side. No, I don't think.
Okay.
So, I already have the side business in place. So just
okay, great.
Just in case.
Lucky you.
Thank you. I think I can say the same about you. Lucky you, man. You've got a career.
Okay, thank you.
So great. So what do you do to make sure that the clock movement is accurate even in varying temperatures? Because our country has varying temperatures from Bangalore to Kashmir. So
yeah. So I may have to get a little bit technical here.
Okay.
So see, in a clock, right? It's the pendulum that regulates the time.
Okay.
Okay, like if a pendulum goes back and forth, in the exact same amount of time, your clock would be accurate.
Okay.
And what decides how long a pendulum has to go back and forth? It's the length of it.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the weight. Contrary to how you might imagine, it's not the weight, it's actually the length of it. So like a 1 meter long pendulum takes about a second to go back and forth, from equilibrium. So that's what decides. Now during summers, the rod tends to get a little longer. When it gets longer, it gets slower, and during winters, it's the other way around again. So my clocks, the pendulums are all compensated, temperature compensated, which means what essentially happens is when the rod gets longer, there is a compensator at the end.
Okay.
That will push the bob. Bob is that weight, which is circular in shape. I mean, it could be circular, it could be a cylindrical, whatever, but this compensator would push the bob back in its center of gravity,
Okay.
Which means the center of gravity of the pendulum will always be at the same point.
Okay.
So that way it is kind of, it compensates for changes in temperature.
And this bob kicks in when there is a temperature when there's a length change.
Yeah, when there is a length change, the compensator expands upwards. Like pendulum rod expands downwards, and at the bottom of the pendulum rod you have a compensator which expands upwards, so it compensates for it.
Okay.
So it moves the bob, which is the weight at the tip of the pendulum. That's called the bob. It moves it back in its center of gravity. So that kind of makes sure that temperature doesn't really affect the accuracy of the clock. And plus, I use metal that expands very little. It's called Invar. It's one of the many materials that you can use, and I use Invar. So it's got a very low coefficient of thermal expansion, which means it expands very little with changes in temperature.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, people use all kinds of materials. There are some very, very good clocks are made with something called fused silica. It almost looks like glass, that pendulum rod.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't use it because I didn't want this breaking and all that stuff, Like I said, I'm in a maintenance has been a big important thing for me. So yeah, so I used things where I know nothing can ever go wrong.
Okay. So that is why it took you 1.5 years. Now I get it.
Well, this is an ongoing thing, I mean, you use one material, later you realize somebody does a research and says like, well, this is material better than that. For instance, I use something called beryllium copper for my springs of the pendulum. Later somebody comes and says like, well, phosphor bronze is better. So there you go. The latest research shows this. So I just changed the material then,
Okay. So I think
there's no, yeah.
I think you're used to it because you are also an architect. So since the materials keep on changing outside, you're like, okay, I'll use this now. So
yeah,
that kind of helped you accept this also.
Yeah, absolutely. So
okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's how it works. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a lot of details. I couldn't find this on the internet. This is another query I had. How do you protect your clocks from magnetism?
See, magnetism is more of a problem in what do you say, in watches and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these were, for instance, like these pilots' watches and everything.
Mm-hmm.
People wanted to make sure that the watches don't get affected by the the magnets inside the instrumentation of the cockpit and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But clocks don't really have a problem with that,
Okay.
So yeah, as long as you don't have a very strong magnet anywhere near around it, it should be fine. It doesn't really
it doesn't affect that much.
Yeah. But in watches, people are very particular. Instead of most watches have a glass case back, right? Instead, they put a metal case back for pilots' watches, just so that the magnetism doesn't affect it.
Oh.
I mean, yeah. So with clocks, I mean, it's not really that much of a big deal.
I did not know that. Thank you for telling me.
Okay.
Because I don't know if it's something that is there in these normal clocks as well. I mean, whether normal clocks get affected with magnetism. Because in my old office, there was this wall. So if you kept the clock on that wall, it will not work at all.
What was it?
On any other wall, it will work. On that wall, it will stop working within 5-10 minutes. So,
wow. What was it, a quartz clock or?
A quartz clock is something that is run by batteries, right?
Yeah.
It was a quartz clock.
It was a quartz clock, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, in which case, I don't know, there could be some kind of, it might have affected it in some way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, even we weren't sure. So we decided that this wall is something that is evil for the clock. And
okay.
to shift it to some other wall. There was no other option. So we just went with it.
It's funnily, there are a lot of these basic things which have still not been figured out. Like when you hang two clocks on the same wall, they start kind of synchronizing. And no one really knows why.
Really?
Yeah, there are all kinds of theories, but yeah,
I'm going to try this.
Say that it's been figured out, but I'm not very sure. But it is something that kind of used to be one of those weird sciences,
Okay, I'm going to try this. I have one wall clock already. I will just have another one next to it with a slight change in time to just check whether they start syncing or not.
Yeah. I don't know what is it about it, but yeah.
Okay, so I'll do so. So Dilip, how much does gravity affect the timepieces, and does something like tourbillon really help?
Yeah. See, again, tourbillon is more of a they use it in watches.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'll have to get a little technical here.
No problem.
So escapement is what regulates time, okay, in a watch or a clock.
Mm-hmm.
So every timepiece needs a power source. That's simple to understand, right?
Right.
You need somebody powering. It could be a battery, it could be a wound spring,
okay,
or it could be a weight which has been wound again. So over time the weight comes down and that powers a clock. So you have these multiple ways of powering a timepiece, and then there's someone else who regulates the time. They decide how fast or slow this wheel has to spin. And that's called the escapement.
Okay.
Now pendulum is a kind of escapement. Now you obviously cannot wear a pendulum in your watch and walk around, right?
No.
So that's when hairspring was invented. Okay? So hairspring is a kind of does what a pendulum does, but you can wear it in your watch, carry it in your car. I mean, initially it used to be ships, so that you could see time while sailing. So that's when hairsprings were invented. So that's another way of regulating time. So tourbillon is like a very hairspring based escapement mechanism, So the another issue with the hairspring is depending on which way your hand is facing, right? If it's a watch, if it's kept flat to the ground, if it's kept vertical, whatever, there is a slight difference in its performance. So tourbillon is kind of compensates for all that. It kind of negates all the demerits that a regular hairspring movement basically has.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's just a very, very complex.
Yes, it is very complex, but thank you for
escapement.
Yes, thank you for explaining it in a simple way so that, when I look for it, I will understand what is happening rather than, just getting confused in the entire mechanism that is happening on the internet. Honestly, I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I couldn't understand what tourbillon really meant.
It's just really, really beautiful.
It's beautiful, but complex.
Escapement. Yeah, extremely complex. Yeah. So the thing is with the clock, right? You don't expect to carry it and walk around. So a pendulum works just fine, because it's going to be in one place.
Right.
So it's when you when you need a mobile timepiece is when these kind of complex mechanisms make sense.
Yes.
So a tourbillon would work very well and give you precise time even if you're on the moon.
Oh, okay. And not that I'm planning to go on the moon, but if I am, I'm going to buy a watch that has a tourbillon.
Yeah.
So, well, Dilip, how long does it take for you to create a custom-made clock if I order one from you?
It would take about 16 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, depends on the amount of customization you need. You want the whole thing gold-plated? Yeah, it will take a bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. You want your biography engraved on it? Yeah, well, it takes even longer. So it totally depends on the level of customization. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so it takes around 16 weeks, I would say.
Do people really engrave their biographies on the clock?
No, not really. I was just joking.
Okay, thank God.
But yeah, we do engrave their names and the date when they commission the clock and all that.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm like, I didn't know people. I really thought people get their biographies engraved. It's quite possible, So I assumed it was true. But okay, you cracked a joke. I didn't get it. Oh my God. So, do you collect watches or clocks, and which are your favorite brands?
So I don't exactly collect watches. I have an HMT, I have an antique Girard Perregaux, a Hamilton, a Fortis. I don't have anything of recent vintage, So see, I'd been on the lookout for like a good watch also for a long time. Then I had my own set of parameters, in terms of what I wanted in it and everything. So yeah, so one of my favorite watchmakers is this brand or this gentleman called Pita Barcelona.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's just amazing.
Okay. I will look him up.
Yeah. So I've met this gentleman and he's like a sort of a mentor to me also, Yeah.
Okay. So those are the clocks that you like. I thought you would get into the clockmaking business also soon. The watchmaking business also soon.
Well, not yet, but yeah, you can't rule it out.
Okay. I will be waiting. Then I'll get you on the podcast again.
Yeah. Sure, looking forward.
Yes. Dilip, what is your take on quartz in the watch or clockmaking world?
You know what? Everything has its place, right? Now, you can't just become snobbish and say that everybody's got to wear a mechanical watch and stuff like that. So quartz has its place. Quartz is really what made watches affordable, in the 70s and 80s. So, even my first watch was a quartz. I was a kid.
Right.
I didn't have a choice. So somebody gave it to me and I wore it, So it was a quartz. And now I'm a bit of a purist now. So to me, an electronic escapement should power an electronic display.
Okay.
Like if you've got a battery inside, it should power an LCD screen or LED screen or whatever, But if you've got a mechanical spring that powers your watch, then it has to power a analog display, like hands.
Right.
So what I don't like is mixing the two, like you put a battery and it's powering analog hands. So that's like, it's not really pure, right? You're kind of faking a analog watch.
Yeah.
So that's my only take,
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, for each his own, I mean,
Yes,
I can't really,
completely
I
agree.
don't personally like to wear one. That doesn't mean it's wrong for them to exist. So
Yes, because I think my first watch, I mean, even the watch that I own now is a quartz watch, and the first one,
I mean,
as you said, it is very affordable, right? So the first one that I had
yeah.
was just $300.
Oh
It,
wow,
it
okay.
just costed $300, and I was a very small kid. Like I think I was in eighth or ninth, and that is what I got as a gift. And it lasted for 10
Okay.
to 12 years. It is still there. It is just, I mean, it's just lying in my cupboard. I don't feel like throwing it away.
Yeah. And nothing ever goes wrong with these things. They're simple
Yes.
machines actually.
Yes. So yes, it's important that they exist, and as you said that, well, we have to coexist with them, to each his own.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you consider this as like craftsmanship. If you have the time to look at your watch, kind of be amazed by it every time you look at it and everything, then you totally deserve to get yourself a mechanical watch. But if it's just going to get lost as one of those many gadgets that you use for your everyday thing, then you really don't need to, put in so much thought into what you're wearing.
As long as you know what the time is and you reach the airport.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like there are many personalities on earth, right? I mean,
yes,
you just have that many products also, I guess.
Agreed. Completely agreed. So how are you balancing your life as an architect and a horologist? I hope I pronounced it right this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's horology with the H is sort of silent.
Oh, okay. It's horology.
Yeah.
Oh.
So,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, as long as you know this profession is called horology, it's already great. So.
Thank you. But I learned the pronunciation. I still messed it up. Okay, no problem. Next time.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
So how are you balancing?
I mean, yeah. I don't know. I think there is a very nice balance to the two. See, part of my day I'm dimensioning my drawings in microns, and other times I'm dimensioning them in meters. So that change in scale sometimes is just breathtaking. I mean, it sort of reminds me of this movie by Charles Eames called Power of 10. They kind of zoom out from a cell in the human body all the way to the galaxies.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know, between these two extremes, they both look the same. When you so I don't know, it just feels like that sometimes. I mean, the change in scale.
Okay. No, I mean, I have not watched the movie, but I'm putting it in my list. I just added it. That sounds quite interesting. The way you look, your perspective is quite interesting about things. And I really like the comparison between, working in microns and working in meters. It's the same thing. Precision is what is important in both the cases.
Yeah.
And you're balancing it well. Nice.
And sometimes, see, we can get a little bit unreasonable, in terms of our expectations, like in terms of perfection. And times when you're I'm like polishing a little part, and then I'm still not happy with how well I've done it. Then I figure I'm looking through a 10x loop, like the magnifier that you wear, and you take it off and it looks perfect. So it's only when you look at it in that detail that you can kind of figure that there is like some level of imperfection. Now let's assume you perfect it and you wear a 20x loop. You figure that it's still not perfect.
Yes.
So you really need to know where to stop, so that's very important.
That is true. And as you said, we keep on running behind perfection, and well, it can never be perfect, and that tiny imperfection is what makes it unique.
Absolutely. And we all like kind of operate within a spectrum of this perceivable perfection, So yeah, so you need to just let go, I feel. I think that letting go is what is perfection.
That takes a lot of effort, and I think that is the most difficult part. But you make it sound easy, so hopefully people who are listening in.
No, it is not easy. Yeah, I mean, I probably make it sound like that, but I'm also struggling myself. But with regard to spectrum, I don't know how wide it needs to be or how narrow it needs to be. So
okay, hope you find it soon. Hope you find the imperfect perfection. which actually works well for you and for your clocks. So that will hopefully help you. So do you like your work as a clockmaker? Is the work repetitive, or does it keep bringing forth new challenges?
I mean, like I said, I mean, there's no end to it. Like in terms of that. Well, even if you consider this that perfection is got a narrow spectrum, like I said, but you keep trying to expand it. So yeah, so it keeps you on your toes, all the time. Like you're always like trying to find a new material that probably has like less demerits compared to the other one that you've been using. So there's always like some boundary you're trying to push. So it kind of, yeah, it doesn't get boring one bit actually.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's always a new type of clock that you can always think of making, that you've been thinking of making for a while. So if you do find the time, I try to invest my time into that.
Okay. And anyway, precision regulator clock is still on the drawing board. It
is on the board. I have another moon phase that is again on the works, which I haven't had time to work on. So
okay, I'll keep following your work. This is interesting. So once you post something new, I'll make sure I share it with my listeners as well.
Sure.
So I think we've already discussed this, but what do you think is the future of watchmaking profession?
See, you know what? I think I get the feeling that there's going to be a surge, in the future. I mean, like there are many people that are moving back to the way things were once upon a time, and like I don't know whether it's like riding bicycles or see, once you've your aspirations are done and dusted, then sometimes like you see things. There's much more romance in the way things were done once upon a time. So I mean, I do see that there's going to be a surge in the future.
Okay.
Where people kind of invest time and money in mechanical watches and basically nice things. See, you're not going to pass on your Casio to your grandchildren. I mean, it's most often a nice mechanical watch that you're going to pass on. So till the time and you can tell the difference between the two, I think there is going to be interest.
Agreed. Completely agreed. Yeah, I hope there's a surge also, because somewhere there's a point, you reach a point, right? You have achieved everything, you have done whatever your peers have done, and your goals are set. And after a certain period of time, you feel that whatever your parents were telling you, that was actually right. What matters more is your health, or being active all day, doing things you like, being with your family. Those things we kind of try to mess up when we're going and finding our goals. But
absolutely,
you tend to come back to your roots after a point. And hopefully people absolutely will too, in terms of clockmaking, come back to the roots. And the mass production that is happening, like every dial is new, everything looks beautiful, but then the beauty of the originality of the watch is something that is to look forward to.
And there's an individual behind that craft, right? I mean, sometimes you need to you need to kind of understand that. It's very important.
Understand the individual, their perspective, and what brought them to make this beautiful piece.
Make this particular piece, and
So Dilip, coming to the last question, finally, this is something that I ask everybody, and it's called, what is your definition of settled?
Well, I'm not very sure I'm the right person to answer that question. So like, I don't know, I'm making clocks right now. Tomorrow I don't know what I'm going to make, so in my case, like, I've understood that, so the day I realize I'm never going to settle, I think for me, that's the day I settled, really, that I accepted it. So like they say, change is the only constant. So I just go where the wind blows, and so that's what that's what I think is settling,
right,
once you accept that.
Okay, so accepting unsettling for you is being settled.
Absolutely.
Well, that is what I'm propagating also, because everyone around you will ask you to settle down, but they don't know what settled means, because life keeps on throwing you curveballs and you have to keep on handling them no matter what. So honestly, you're never settled in life.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Dilip, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge and making me as a layman understand how your clocks work and the different mechanisms that go behind it, and for being so patient while saying all these things. Thank you so much for doing so.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Amrita. It was wonderful talking to you.
It was wonderful talking to you as well. So, Dilip, is there any website or a page where people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, I've got a website. I mean, I hardly update it, but yeah, there is still there is still some basic information regarding what I do. It's dsivaraman.com.
Okay.
That's Shivaraman without an H.
Yes. I will be adding the links in the description anyway. So
sure.
I hope people do get in touch with you and learn more about Gato, Lisko, and the clocks that are still on the drawing board.
And, sure.
And you can follow him on Instagram as well. That is where I got in touch with him. So I will be adding the links to his Instagram page, and you can always talk to him if you have any more questions. I hope that's okay.
Oh, you're asking me now?
Yeah. I hope that's okay.
Okay. Yeah. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine, Amrita. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure, Amrita. It was really nice chatting with you.
It was nice talking to you as well. The pleasure is all mine, honestly. I'm so glad that I found you.
Hi! If you can hear this, that means you have reached the end of the episode. So like, share, subscribe, follow, stay tuned to Unsettling. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can always reach out to me on my Instagram page, Amrita Sukumar _unsettling, or send me an email on podcast.unsettling.as@gmail.com. Hope to hear from you soon. Bye.